Have you ever, stood in the harsh fluorescent light of an office break room and just watched a perfectly rational adult completely lose their mind over a broken vending machine?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it is a fascinating study in human psychology.
Right. Because they put their coin in, they press the button, say, I don't know, C4 for the peanut butter cups, and nothing happens.
The coil just doesn't turn.
Exactly. So what is the immediate human response? I mean, they press the button again, just a little harder, as if the machine, didn't hear them the first time.
Right, and then comes the tapping on the glass.
Yeah. Within about 30 seconds, you are watching a person with, a mortgage and a 401k physically shaking a 600-pound appliance, just completely indignant that they put in their currency and did not receive their expected transaction.
We are just deeply, fundamentally wired for this, aren't we?
We really are. We want to put our token in, press the button, and get the product. And if we look really closely at our own internal lives, it is terrifying how often we treat our relationship with the divine the exact same way.
Oh, treating prayer like a cosmic vending machine.
Exactly. We put in a certain amount of faith or good behavior or, desperation, and we expect the universe or God to dispense the solution right at our feet, on demand.
But what happens when you press the button and you put in everything you have and absolutely nothing comes out?
Right. What happens when the only response to your deepest, most agonizing crisis is just a wall of absolute silence?
I mean, that is the terror of the spiritual life, isn't it? The exact moment the transaction fails. And I think that is why the material we are looking at today is so unsettling.
It really is. And before we get too deep into that silence, let me formally welcome you to the Common Room. We're broadcasting from the little station on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas. This is Chesterton Radio. Stories, ideas, wonder.
Pull up a chair.
Yeah, we have the fire going, and you are going to need the warmth because we are starting this deep dive with one of the coldest, most perplexing interactions in ancient literature.
We're looking at Matthew chapter 15, right?
Yes, verses 21 through 28. And I specifically wanted to use the Douay-Rheims translation for this. I know modern translations are, easier to read, but the Douay-Rheims just has this stark, poetic gravity to it.
It was translated directly from the Latin Vulgate in the late 16th century, I believe.
Right, and it doesn't try to soften the blow of the language. It preserves the ancient friction, and there is just a lot of friction here.
Which we need. I mean, if we read these ancient texts and they sound like a pleasant greeting card, we are definitely misreading them.
Totally. So let's set the geographical scene, because geography is theology here. Jesus has left his usual territory. He has retired to the coasts of Tyre and Sidon.
Ah, right.
And Tom Hoops, in his article from Benedictine College Media called Beg for Scraps and Get God, he describes this brilliantly as the Timbuktu of the Holy Land.
That's a great phrase.
So let's dig into what that actually means, because this isn't just a quiet vacation spot for Jesus and the disciples.
Not at all. I mean, Tyre and Sidon are ancient Phoenician cities on the Mediterranean coast in what is modern-day Lebanon.
So deep pagan territory.
Exactly. It is Gentile land. For a Jewish rabbi in the first century to travel here, he's completely leaving the safety of his own religious and cultural borders.
He's walking into an area steeped in entirely different gods.
Different gods, different customs, and a really long, complicated history of hostility with Israel. It is an environment of religious impurity, at least from the perspective of his disciples. They are way out of bounds.
Okay, so they're walking through this foreign landscape, probably already on edge, and a local woman approaches, a Canaanite woman.
And Canaanite is a very loaded term.
Right. These were the ancient ancestral enemies of the Israelites. She is a pagan, a Gentile, and a woman, which, in the social hierarchy of the ancient Near East, puts her at the absolute bottom of the ladder of influence.
She has zero leverage.
Zero. But she is a mother, and her daughter is, as the text says, grievously troubled by the devil. She is desperate.
So she comes crying out to him.
Yeah, and she uses a Jewish messianic title, which is super strange for a pagan. She says, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David."
Which brings us to the moment that just stops you in your tracks.
It stops me every single time I read it. The response she gets from the man known as the Good Shepherd. Verse 23 says, "Who answered her not a word?"
The silence.
It is absolute chilling silence. And I have to challenge this narrative right out of the get here, because I understand that theologians have spent 2 millennia trying to explain this away, but if we look at this purely on a human level, it borders on cruelty.
It really does.
You have a desperate mother whose child is suffering intolerably, begging a known healer for help, and he just stares straight ahead and ignores her. It violates every established characteristic of Jesus up to this point in the narrative. I mean, why the silent treatment?
Well, I don't think we should try to explain it away or soften it. You're completely right to call it cruel if we view it through the lens of modern customer service.
Right.
We expect immediate validation. But let's look at the mechanics of what is happening around that silence. Because the silence is doing work. It is creating a vacuum. And look at what rushes in to fill it.
His disciples. They step in and tell him, "Send her away, for she crieth after us."
And notice their motivation here. They aren't saying, "Lord, she's suffering, please help her."
No.
And they aren't even really saying, "Lord, she's a pagan, she shouldn't be here." They are saying, "She is annoying us."
Wow. Yeah, the Greek implies a continuous, bothersome crying out. Right. She is causing a scene.
Exactly. The disciples are basically the executives of this new religious movement, and they just want security to escort the nuisance off the premises so they can get back to their important walking.
And then Jesus breaks his silence, but not to comfort her. He seemingly agrees with the disciples' exclusionary worldview.
He draws a hard line.
He really does. He says, "I was not sent, but to the sheep that are lost of the house of Israel." He is drawing a hard boundary. He's telling her that his mission has an ethnocentric limit, and she is just outside of it.
And Hoopes points out the devastation of this statement. Jesus is essentially saying, "I am the good shepherd, but I am not your shepherd. You are not in my flock."
So if we go back to that vending machine analogy, this isn't just the machine failing to dispense the candy.
No.
This is the machine printing out a receipt that says, "You are not authorized to purchase this."
That's a brutal rejection.
But her desperation overrides the rejection. She doesn't storm off. She actually comes closer. She bypasses the disciples. She adores him. And she strips away all the theological title. She just says, "Lord, help me."
And this leads to the climax of the scene, which is genuinely shocking.
Yeah. Jesus looks at her and says, "It is not good to take the bread of the children and to cast it to the dogs."
Let's pause here.
We have to. Because if someone called a woman a dog today, it would be a severe insult. But in the first century Middle East, it was unimaginably worse, wasn't it?
Oh, entirely worse. We project our modern Western idea of dogs onto the text.
We think of like golden retrievers sleeping at the foot of the bed, wearing little sweaters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in the Old Testament and the ancient Near Eastern context, dogs were not domesticated pets. They were feral, diseased scavengers.
They ran in packs.
They ran in packs, they lived off garbage, they were unclean pests. To call someone a dog was to strip them of their humanity and categorize them as a scavenging parasite.
Man. Hoopes offers a modern analogy to try and capture the sheer power imbalance in the social chasm here, and I think it's brilliant.
Let's hear it.
So picture the CEO of a massive trillion-dollar global corporation. He is on a retreat with his highest level executives having a closed-door strategy session. Suddenly, a housekeeper, an immigrant, someone with zero institutional power, pushes her way into the boardroom, interrupting the executives to ask the CEO to intervene in a personal medical crisis with her child.
Okay.
The executives are rolling their eyes, furious at the breach of protocol, and the CEO looks at her and essentially says, "Why should I take the resources meant for my shareholders and throw them to a stray animal in the alleyway?"
It is a brutal, humiliating dismissal.
So I need you to explain the theological mechanics here. Because how do we reconcile this behavior with the idea of a loving God? Is he just having a terrible day?
Well, if he is just a human teacher, he is having a terrible day and acting like a bigot.
Right.
But if we operate within the theological framework that he is the divine Son of God, his actions require a much deeper reading. Hoopes brings in St. John Chrysostom, one of the brilliant early church fathers, to pull back the curtain on the mechanics of this interaction.
Okay, what does Chrysostom say?
Chrysostom argues that Jesus is not insulting her out of malice. Jesus, possessing divine foreknowledge, knows exactly the caliber of the woman standing in front of him. He knows her faith is a massive, hidden diamond.
So he is setting a trap for the disciples.
I wouldn't call it a trap, I would call it a crucible.
A crucible.
Yeah, a crucible uses intense heat to burn away impurities and reveal the pure gold underneath. Jesus is constructing a massive, seemingly impenetrable wall of religious and social rejection.
But why?
For two reasons. First, to give her the platform to exercise and demonstrate this heroic, cosmic level of faith. And second, and this is crucial, to hold a mirror up to his own disciples.
Ah, I see that. He is vocalizing the exact prejudices that are sitting silently in the disciples' hearts.
Precisely. The disciples believed salvation was exclusively for the children of Israel and that the Gentiles were dogs. Jesus says the quiet part out loud.
He voices their bigotry to force it out into the open.
Exactly, setting the stage for this Canaanite woman to absolutely dismantle it.
And she dismantles it with a response that I honestly think is the greatest piece of spiritual maneuvering in all of history.
It's incredible.
She is standing there, having just been called a scavenging animal by the man holding the power of life and death over her daughter. If she gets defensive, she loses.
Right.
If she argues about her human rights, she loses. If she walks away in justified anger, her daughter dies. Instead, she says, "Yea, Lord, for the whelps also eat of the crumbs that fall from the table of their masters."
It is an intellectual and spiritual masterpiece. Let's look closely at the psychological pivot she makes here. She is facing a total blockade. Jesus has defined the terms of reality. There is a table. The children of Israel are seated at it. The bread belongs to them. The dogs are on the floor.
And she does not dispute this architecture.
Not at all. She doesn't demand a chair. She accepts the absolute lowest position he offers.
Oh.
But by accepting the position of the dog, she completely rewrites the relationship.
I want to make sure I understand the mechanism of what she's doing here, because she's basically saying, you are right. I am a dog. I have no standing, no rights, no claim to the covenant of Israel.
Yes.
But a dog still belongs to a household. A dog still has a master. If you are the master and I am the dog on the floor, you are still obligated to feed me, even if it is just the scraps that fall off the edge.
She weaponizes his own insult to forge a tether between them.
Wow. Weaponize is a strong word, but in a spiritual sense, yes. She uses his own theological metaphor to trap him in his own mercy.
And Jesus' reaction proves that this was the outcome he desired all along. He doesn't look at her and say, wow, you found a loophole.
Right, he's not annoyed that he got bested.
Exactly. The entire tone shifts instantly. The wall drops. He says, O woman, great is thy faith. Be it done to thee as thou wilt. He grants her request entirely. Her daughter is healed from that very hour.
And Hoops makes a really interesting linguistic point about the way Jesus addresses her in that moment. He calls her woman.
Yes. In our modern vernacular, calling someone woman sounds dismissive, like, woman, get out of my way.
Right.
But in the Gospel of John, Jesus uses that specific title for his own mother, Mary.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He calls her woman at the wedding at Cana when she prompts his first public miracle, and he calls her woman from the cross. It is a title of immense theological weight, echoing the woman in the book of Genesis whose seed would crush the serpent.
So he is elevating this pagan outsider, this dog, to a parallel status with the Blessed Virgin.
He is. And why? Because the Canaanite woman's response is the pagan equivalent of Mary's fiat, her statement at the Annunciation, let it be done to me according to your word. Both women are confronted with an overwhelming, terrifying manifestation of the divine will. Both women accept it with total humility. They perform the singular act that defines true prayer. They let God define the terms of reality. They let God be God.
That is a staggering contrast to the vending machine mentality.
It really is.
If prayer is a transaction, we are the CEO, and God is the employee fulfilling the order. Or, to use Hoop's phrase, we treat God like he is the dog.
That's good.
We expect him to sit by the door, wait for our command, ignore all our flaws unconditionally, and fetch whatever solution we throw out into the yard.
It is the ultimate inversion of the cosmos. We want the creator of the universe to operate on our timetable. But the Canaanite woman shows us that we must be the ones waiting at the edge of the table.
We are the ones who must recognize our profound littleness.
Yes. And this isn't an isolated incident. Think about how perfectly this maps onto the story of the Gentile centurion.
Oh, that is a fantastic connection. Let's look at that. Because you have another outsider, a Roman military officer, the occupying force, the enemy of Israel, and he approaches Jesus also on behalf of someone else.
Right. Not his daughter, but his paralyzed servant.
And they have the exact same spiritual posture. The centurion comes from outside the fold. Jesus actually offers to come to his house to perform the healing. But the centurion stops him. What does he say?
He says, Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant shall be healed.
I am not worthy. It is the same acceptance of lowliness. He recognizes that he has no inherent right to demand the presence of the divine.
And he pairs that profound humility with an absolute, unshakable confidence in Christ's authority.
Right, because he explains that he is a man under authority, with soldiers under him. He says to one, go, and he goes.
He recognizes that Christ commands the fabric of the universe the exact same way a general commands an army. Both the centurion and the Canaanite woman understand the hierarchy of reality far better than the disciples do.
They understand that they are approaching the CEO of reality.
Exactly.
The disciples think they are the board of directors, but they are really just interns who don't understand the business.
That's a great way to put it.
But I want to transition here because this concept of humility, of accepting our position as beggars at the table, is incredibly difficult for the human ego to swallow.
Oh, it's agonizing.
We crave status. We crave security. We want to be the ones holding the bread, not the ones on the floor waiting for a crumb. So let's move from the dusty roads of Tyre into the marble halls of power and look at how this struggle plays out in narrative drama.
Let's do it.
Let's pull in the classic Chesterton radio drama, The Greatest Story Ever Told, specifically the presentation titled The Woman and the Treasure.
It is a masterful piece of audio theater.
It really is.
It dramatizes the exact psychological struggle we are talking about. The terror of letting go of our earthly scraps to reach for the divine.
Now, I won't give away every dramatic beat. I highly encourage anyone listening to find the original Chesterton radio presentation and just let the atmosphere wash over you. But we need to examine the core conflict.
Right.
We are taken to a lavish banquet at Pontius Pilate's palace in Jerusalem. We meet Claudia, Pilate's wife, and Lois, the wife of an incredibly wealthy merchant. They are surrounded by the absolute pinnacle of worldly security. Roman dignitaries, international merchants, silk, gold, power.
But amidst all this noise and opulence, Lois and Claudia are having a crisis of conscience.
Because they have recently heard Jesus preaching.
Specifically, they heard him tell the rich young ruler, "If thou wilt be perfect, go and sell that thou hast and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me."
This radical demand has just lodged in their minds.
So these two women, sitting in the lap of luxury, make a secret, daring pact. They agree to start dismantling their earthly security.
Right, they promise to take their most prized, priceless jewels, sell them one by one, and quietly give the money to the destitute.
It is a beautiful vow, driven by genuine inspiration, but it immediately collides with the bedrock of human nature. The drama focuses on Lois's character arc, and it is a painful, brilliant illustration of why we fail where the Canaanite woman succeeded.
So what happens? Lois takes the first step, right?
She does.
Yeah.
She takes an ancient, priceless gem, a royal stone that once belonged to an emperor, given to her by her husband, and she gives it away to a jeweler named Daniel to be sold for the poor.
She drops the crumb.
She drops the crumb.
Yeah.
But the moment the gem is physically out of her hands, the psychological torment begins.
The regret is instantaneous.
Yes. She meets her husband later and admits she is losing her mind. She's been pacing the balcony all night. She says, "I would rather have the gem back. I would rather be able to admire it."
The fear of losing her tangible security completely overwrites her spiritual inspiration.
Completely. She breaks the pact with Claudia, rushes out into the street, and runs to Daniel the jeweler to try and buy her own gem back.
And of course, Daniel informs her she is too late. The gem has been sold, and the funds have already been dispersed to a destitute widow. Her treasure is gone.
It's a tragic moment.
Now, I want to challenge our reading of Lois here, because it is very easy to listen to that drama and judge her, to say she is just shallow and greedy. But is it just greed? When you hear the panic in the actress's voice, it sounds like something much more primal. Isn't she just exhibiting the natural human instinct to cling to what we can see, touch, and ensure?
I think dismissing it as mere greed misses the profound tragedy of the human condition.
Right.
Lois is treating her jewel as a talisman against the chaos of the world. Wealth, in the ancient world as much as today, is a buffer against suffering. It is tangible protection.
So when Christ tells the rich young ruler to lay up treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, he's asking for a psychological impossibility for most of us.
He is asking for a radical leap of trust into the invisible. And Lois's brain cannot compute the invisible. She is terrified. The gem is her life vest, and she feels like she has just thrown it overboard into a dark ocean.
She is terrified of letting go of her earthly scrap because she doesn't actually believe there is a master's table waiting to feed her.
Exactly. And the radio drama highlights this tragedy by contrasting Lois with Claudia.
Claudia's realization is so powerful.
It is. Claudia actually goes and meets the poor widow who received the charity funded by Lois's gem. Claudia sees this woman weeping with profound gratitude because her starving children are going to eat.
And in that moment of witnessing actual grace, Claudia looks at the heavy, priceless jewels still draped around her own neck, and she has this devastating epiphany.
She realizes they have no warmth.
Yes. They are just cold, dead rocks. They offer no real life.
That is the thematic bridge connecting Pilate's palace right back to the coasts of Tyre.
Because Lois is like a guest sitting at a magnificent feast, but she is cowering under the table, desperately clutching a single stale crumb of earthly wealth, terrified someone will take it from her. And because her focus is entirely on her fist wrapped around that crumb, she never looks up. She completely misses the master, sitting right above her.
While the Canaanite woman, who has absolutely nothing, no jewels, no status, no claim to the religious covenant, throws herself on the floor with open, empty hands.
She begs for whatever crumb of the divine she can get, and through her sheer emptiness, she creates the space to receive the master himself.
It is the ultimate paradox. And this structural paradox shows up over and over again in the texts. Let's look at the parable of the prodigal son. It is the exact same mechanism of grace.
It is. Think about the arc of the prodigal son. He demands his inheritance, his earthly security, his jewels, and he goes to a foreign land and squanders it all.
He hits absolute rock bottom. Where does he end up? Literally feeding pigs, unclean animals. He becomes lower than a dog.
And in that moment of total destitution, he decides to go back to his father. But notice his plan.
Right, he doesn't plan to march in and demand his bedroom back.
No, he rehearses his speech. He says, I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee. I am not now worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants.
He is asking for the scrap. He's asking to be the dog under the table. He just wants basic survival on the outer edges of the estate.
But what happens? Because he returns stripped of all entitlement, with his ego completely dismantled, he creates the capacity to receive grace.
When his father sees him, he doesn't say, okay, here is a mop, start in the kitchen.
Right. He runs to him. He gives him the best robe, the signet ring of authority, and slaughters the fatted calf. He gives him the entire feast. He restores his sonship.
You ask for the scrap with a truly humble heart, and the universe responds by giving you the kingdom. It makes no logical sense. It is terrible mathematics.
Which reminds me of another impossible math equation in the Gospels, the loaves and fishes.
The loaves and fishes is the perfect physical manifestation of this spiritual principle.
You have a massive crowd, thousands of hungry people in a desolate place. Astonishing human need, and what do they have for security? 5 loaves of bread and 2 small fishes. Scraps.
Literal crumbs.
Literal crumbs. When the disciples hold that bread, looking at it through the lens of human economics, it is a tragedy. It is pitifully small, inadequate, stark reminder of their poverty.
But the paradox is that when they surrender those scraps to Christ, when they let go of their anxiety about scarcity and place the little they have into the hands of the divine, the mathematics of heaven take over.
What is insufficient in human hands becomes superabundant in God's hands. The scraps become a feast that leaves 12 baskets of leftovers.
The crumbs become the feast. It requires a complete rewiring of how we perceive value and reality.
Which brings us, inevitably and perfectly, to a man who spent his entire life trying to rewire our perception of reality, G.K. Chesterton. We need to apply the Chestertonian lens to this, because he was the absolute master of articulating these exact paradoxes.
We definitely do. Let's look at his collection of essays, The Defendant, and his masterpiece, Orthodoxy.
Because Chesterton is vital here, right? He provides a philosophical framework for understanding how the Canaanite woman's humility actually functions.
Yes. In The Defendant, Chesterton sets out to defend things that late Victorian society overlooked, dismissed, or actively mocked. He defends Penny Dreadful's ugly things, detective stories. But his defense of humility is where we really need to focus.
Because modern culture, and honestly, the culture of Chesterton's time as well, fundamentally misunderstands humility.
They do.
We think humility is like a psychological pathology. We think it means walking around with a slumped posture, constantly telling yourself, I'm garbage, I'm worthless, I have no talent. It is viewed as a form of self-loathing.
Exactly, and Chesterton despised that view. He argued that true optimism, true joy, does not mean putting on rose-colored glasses and ignoring the harsh, dirty realities of the world. True optimism requires recognizing the inherent miraculous value in the lowest, most seemingly insignificant things. Humility, for Chesterton, is a matter of scale and perspective.
Let's investigate the mechanics of that. How does shrinking yourself enlarge the world?
Well, Chesterton argued that the human ego has a tendency to expand until it takes up the entire universe. If you believe you are the center of reality, if you inflate your own importance until you are a giant, then nothing can surprise you.
Because everything is beneath you.
Exactly. The world becomes small, predictable, and boring. There's no room for awe. But if you practice true humility, if you radically shrink your ego, you suddenly become small enough to see how enormous everything else really is.
Ah.
If you become an ant, a single blade of grass becomes a towering, majestic redwood tree. A puddle becomes an ocean. A crumb becomes a feast.
Oh, man. That is the psychological profile of the Canaanite woman perfectly articulated. She shrinks her ego down to zero. By accepting the lowest possible status, a scavenging dog, she doesn't actually believe she's devoid of human value.
We know this because her persistence proves she knows her daughter's life has infinite, non-negotiable value.
Yes. But by making her ego infinitesimally small in relation to Christ, she clears all the static out of the way. She becomes small enough to perceive the towering cosmic scale of the God standing in front of her.
And because she sees him clearly, she can speak to him truthfully. Her humility isn't groveling. It is supreme, clear-eyed realism. She sees the architecture of reality.
And that ability to see clearly brings us to orthodoxy, where Chesterton tackles the tension between seeking the unknown and needing security.
We have to talk about the opening metaphor of orthodoxy. It is one of the most famous images in modern Christian literature.
For anyone who hasn't read it, Chesterton describes a thought experiment. He pictures an English yachtsman who sets sail from his home country, armed with maps and a sense of adventure, intending to discover a strange, exotic new island in the South Seas. He sails for months through fogs and storms, finally spots land, rows ashore, plants his flag in this alien territory with the thrill of discovery, only to realize, as the fog clears, that he has landed at Brighton. He has discovered England.
He thought he was finding a strange new world, but he merely rediscovered his own home, approaching it from the outside.
Which is wild.
Chesterton used this to explain his own philosophical journey. He spent his youth trying to invent a radical, new, progressive philosophy to explain the universe, only to discover that Orthodox Christianity had already articulated it perfectly centuries before.
He writes that he was looking for a philosophy that could reconcile two deep human needs, the need for astonishment and the need for security.
The thrill of being a stranger in a strange land, combined with the deep comfort of being safely at home.
Precisely. And if we lay that metaphor over the story of the Canaanite woman, the alignment is just staggering. Think about her approach. She comes to Jesus exactly as a stranger in a strange land. She is a Phoenician pagan. He is the Jewish Messiah.
She approaches him with profound astonishment, recognizing his terrifying divine power over demons.
But the moment she accepts her place at the foot of the table, the moment she claims the scraps falling from his hands, she discovers the fundamental, shocking truth of the universe.
Yes. She discovers that this foreign god is actually the lord of her own home. She realizes that the master's table, which she thought she was entirely excluded from, has always had room for her underneath it.
She reconciles the absolute astonishment of divine grace with the ultimate security of belonging to the master. She lands back in England.
She thought she was begging from a stranger, and she realizes she is eating from the hand of her creator.
Which brings us, I think, to the core wrestling match of this entire deep dive. This is the uncomfortable question that all of the source material forces us to confront. If you are listening to this and you are trying to navigate your own spiritual life, you have to ask yourself this. Do we sometimes approach God asking merely for solutions, for favors, for physical healing, for financial success, or for relief from our crippling anxieties, only to discover that Christianity is offering us something infinitely, terrifyingly larger?
Are we asking for a fix when we're being offered God himself?
That is the central friction. We want the vending machine. We want the pain to stop. We want the bank account to fill so we can breathe. We want the broken relationship to mend.
And we have to be clear, those are natural, good human desires. Lois wanted her royal gem back because she wanted to feel safe in a dangerous world. The Canaanite woman wanted her daughter healed. The desire for a solution is not the problem.
No.
The problem is when the solution becomes our only metric for God's goodness. If we stop there, we remain consumers.
But let's look at the brutal reality of this, because I promised we would not just deliver a sermon of easy platitudes today. We have to confront the problem of unanswered prayer.
It is the elephant in the room.
In the text, the Canaanite woman did get her specific request. Her daughter was healed, the centurion's servant was healed, the prodigal son got a feast. But we all know, and many of us have deeply experienced, the agonizing reality of praying desperately for a loved one's cancer to go into remission, or for a child to come back home, or for a period of crushing depression to lift. And the answer is just silence.
The vending machine takes the coin, and nothing dispenses.
The screen goes blank. How do we reconcile the Canaanite woman's success story with the lived reality that faithful, humble people do not always get the outcome they are begging for?
It is the most difficult question in theology. And anyone who offers a neat three-step answer to the problem of pain is definitely selling you something. But if we look closely at the mechanics of Matthew 15, we might find a lens to view that silence through. We must distinguish between trusting God and treating prayer as a contractual transaction.
Explain that difference.
Well, if prayer is purely a transaction, if the equation is, I have a certain amount of faith, therefore God is obligated to produce a certain outcome, then when the outcome fails to materialize, the entire system collapses. God is a failure and faith is a lie.
Because the machine is broken?
Because the machine is broken. But what if God is not a machine? Look at the silence of Christ before the Canaanite woman. It felt cruel. It felt like a rejection. But what was it actually doing?
It was drawing something out of her.
Yes. Sometimes God's initial silence to our prayers or his apparent refusal to grant our specific, desperate request is not a rejection of us. It is a severe, painful invitation to step out of the transactional paradigm entirely.
So the silence is designed to shift our focus. It forces us to stop looking at the chocolate bar stuck in the coil and look up to see who actually owns the machine.
Exactly. If the vending machine always works perfectly, if every prayer is answered with a neat, timely solution, you never actually encounter the divine. You just encounter a supernatural service provider.
You remain a consumer of miracles.
But when the transaction fails, when you are left in the agonizing silence, you are forced into a crisis of relationship. Will you stay?
The Canaanite woman's faith was not praised because she possessed a magical, rhetorical formula to corner Jesus into saying yes.
No. Her faith was praised because she desired a relationship with the Master, more than she desired her own dignity or immediate comfort. She was willing to endure the silence, the scorn, and the terrifying ambiguity to remain tethered to him.
If we only want sixes, we just want a cosmic mechanic. But the shocking claim of Christianity is that the mechanic actually wants to adopt you. He wants to move you into his house.
And perhaps the only way we ever realize our desperate need for the Master is when the earthly scraps we were clinging to, our health, our wealth, our 5-year plans are stripped away, or when they fundamentally fail to satisfy our deepest hunger.
Just like Claudia realizing her jewels were cold stones.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of all these ideas. Tom Hoops closes his article with a point that bridges this ancient, dusty encounter entire directly into the present-day lives of millions of people.
He points out the profound, undeniable connection between the posture of the Canaanite woman and the liturgy of the Catholic Mass, specifically the communion line.
Let's investigate that because it is a stunning parallel.
Every single Sunday, congregations all over the world get out of their pews and approach the altar. And what are they actually doing? If you look at the mechanics of the liturgy, they are essentially walking up to the front as Gentile dogs begging for scraps.
It is exactly that. Right before the congregation approaches for communion, the priest holds up the host, and the entire congregation literally repeats a variation of the Gentile centurion's words, which fundamentally echo the Canaanite women's theological posture.
They strike their breasts and say, "Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word and my soul shall be healed."
I am not worthy. We are explicitly agreeing with the barrier Jesus initially put up in Matthew 15. We are saying, "You are right, Lord. It is not fitting to take the bread of the angels and cast it to the dogs. I have no inherent right to sit at this table. I am a mess. I am broken. I am outside the boundary."
We come begging for the scraps. We come acknowledging our total dependence, our inability to save ourselves. We step completely out of the illusion of control, that terrifying illusion of security that Lois couldn't let go of, and we publicly admit our profound poverty. We shrink our egos.
But here is where the great paradox of the whole deep dive lands. We come to the altar begging for a scrap. We hold out our hands expecting a crumb. But the profound reality-bending twist of the liturgy is that the scrap we receive is not a leftover. It is not a secondary consolation prize for the outcasts.
No, because the theology dictates that the scrap the Eucharist contains the Master himself. It is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. The beggar drops to the floor, asks for a crumb falling from the table, and God responds by giving them the absolute entirety of himself.
You ask for a crumb, and you swallow the universe.
It is the prodigal son asking to be a slave and being handed the signet ring. It is the 5 loaves of bread feeding a multitude. It is the man sailing across the dark, terrifying ocean to find a strange land, only to find the door to his own home wide open, waiting for him.
And that, ultimately, is the only answer to the agonizing friction of unanswered prayer. When God seems not to answer our specific, desperate request for an earthly fix, when the silence is deafening, it may be because He is using the silence to hollow us out.
He is expanding our capacity.
He is preparing us to receive something infinitely larger than a solved problem. He wants to give us Himself. But as long as our hands are clenched tight around our own plans, like Lois's white-knuckled grip on her jewel, we physically cannot open our hands to receive Him.
We have to drop the rock to catch the bread. We have to let go of the illusion of the transaction to enter into the reality of the relationship.
We really do.
So what does this all mean for us as we log off and walk back out into our lives today? Let's just slow the pace down for a second. I want to leave you with an image to carry with you.
Please do.
Think of the Canaanite woman from Matthew 15. Picture her there on the dusty, sun-baked floor in a foreign land. She is kneeling in the dirt, surrounded by men who despise her, who want her thrown out into the street like garbage. She has completely abandoned her pride. She has abandoned her rights. She is perfectly, wonderfully content to just have the crumbs that fall to the floor. She expects so little from the world.
But consider the nature of hunger.
Right. A crumb might sustain a dog for an hour, but it cannot satisfy a human soul. What if the silence she faced wasn't a delay in the transaction? What if the silence was designed to amplify her hunger? What if God was waiting for her hunger to grow so large, so expansive, that a mere answered prayer wouldn't be enough to fill it?
The great breathtaking surprise of Christianity is not that God eventually gives us what we ask for.
No, it is that God looks at our desperate, starving requests for scraps and realizes that the only thing that will actually cure our hunger is His own life. He does not ultimately offer us scraps from His table.
No, He does not.
He invites us to the table. Thank you for joining us in the common room. From the little station on Commercial Street, Chesterton Radio, stories, ideas, wonder, the open door is always on.